really annoying. It sounds annoying in my head, but what can you do? We move, show must go on. I have read 7 books again this month, same as last month. As I said, that's quite average for me, that's just what I normally read. There were some really good books this month, and also some that I just didn't really care for, same as always, but let's get into it. So the first book that I finished this month was Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. I carried this book over from January into February. I read this mostly in January, I remember, but it took me such a long time to finish this, like almost 2 weeks, which was because it wasn't my favourite, unfortunately. I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I want to say beforehand, this is not a bad book, this is more of a me problem. The reason that I picked up this book was mainly for the family story. Looking back at my reading history, that's what I really like. I really like character-driven family stories, family sagas. I really like when the authors take their time and let you get to know the different characters in family, the family dynamics, what each person within that family, what their relationship is to each other. If this book wasn't so character-driven, I think I would have just DNF'd this. We follow the Hildebrand family who live in New Prospect, which is a fictional town, I believe, meant to be near Chicago in the United States. We've got 2 parents, which are Marion and Russ, and their 4 children. It's been a little while since I read this, sorry. Becky, Clem, I had to look this up, Perry and Judson. You can tell how forgettable this book was for me. We get the point of views or chapters from all of the characters apart from Judson. This book is going to be a trilogy, I believe, so I'm gonna guess that Judson is going to be a bigger part of the story in the upcoming book. Most of it is set on Christmas Eve in the 90s, and it opens with Russ's chapter. He is a pastor at this church. I should tell you beforehand, if you don't like reading about religion or God talk, anything like that, this might not be for you. That is mainly the reason why I was a bit like, not sure. I don't like reading about religion. It's not, I'm just unfortunately not interested in it. Good for you if you are. There's just nothing in it for me to relate to because it's just so far removed from my own life. But it's a very central point of this story. All of these people within this family are part of a church in one way or another. The 2 of the children are also part of the church's youth group called Crossroads, and just religion in itself is a very focal point of the story, which even though I didn't like, I thought was interesting. Throughout the story you realise that religion and being part of the church and just being raised in such a religious way is what connects this family. Some of them practice it, some of them are more hesitant, but it is a very distinct through line and it connects all the different family members in different ways. I don't want to say too much. I think this has definitely got an audience. Obviously it's a very popular book right now. I don't have to tell you to read or not to read Jonathan Franzen. He's a very established author, so who am I to say? One thing I really didn't like about this book is the weight discussion. The mum, Marion, she struggled with her weight a lot of her life and always trying to lose weight, always going on diets, and there's one point in this book where she steps on the scales and they say the specific number of her weight, and then the author goes on to judge that as a bad number, and I think her stepping on the scale was followed by the sentence of that in itself was enough reason for her to cry, so I didn't like that part at all. I'm not sure why that was even necessary. I understand that her character and her insecurities, a lot of that stems from her self-image and her self-worth being so connected to her weight and her appearance, but I'm not sure if it was necessary to put in a specific weight and then judge that as being bad. That just once again made me realise this is written by a man. Do with that information what you will. I've not got time for that. What's the point? I feel like there should have been an editor that just cut that out because it didn't add to the story. That being said, if you don't mind reading about heavy themes of religion, if you like a family story, by all means go ahead and read this book. You'll probably like it. It is well written. It just wasn't exactly my cup of tea. But on to the next, which was This Thing Between Us by Gus Marino. One book that I actually really liked. I took some notes, even very prepared. Could you tell that I didn't take any notes for Crossroads? That just all came from the heart. This Thing Between Us. It's a horror novel. I would almost classify it as a bit experimental, but that might just be because I've never read a horror novel like this. It's about a husband who loses his wife very early on in life, or very early on into the marriage even, in a freak accident. It's very public. We meet him right after the fact, I believe, and this whole book is written to his wife. So the sentence will start as, when you, after you died, when you did this, when you said this to me. And I really like the style. I thought it was very... So this whole novel is mainly about grief, about loss, about love, obviously, and what can happen to a person's mind when they are so distraught over losing someone they love so much. Throughout this whole book, I wasn't sure whether the things that were written on the page were actually happening or if they were just a product of this guy's imagination, because he's so deeply lost and so, yeah, lost within his grief. I should probably backtrack and tell you what this book is actually about. That will probably make sense before I tell you what I thought about this book. So as I said, he loses his wife in a freak accident. He then moves to a secluded cabin to deal with his wife's death by himself. He's pretty annoyed by all the people trying to console him, trying to tell him stories about his wife that he just doesn't care about, all these people that didn't know her, and he just wants to be by himself and kind of come to terms with him now being alone. There's also a smart speaker, like an Alexa-esque smart speaker thing, that plays a big role, especially in the first half of the story. There were a lot of scenes involving that smart speaker that were so creepy to me. I read this mostly at night, which obviously added to the fact, but just the smart speaker doing things by itself, ordering things that the couple haven't ordered. This is one specific scene where he goes into the living room at night and the smart speaker for some reason is on and projecting all these weird shapes onto the wall and making really strange sounds, and it's just, it might not sound scary, but the way that it was portrayed and written about was so specific. I think because this is so now, and there's so many conversations about what these speakers can actually do, what they're capable of, what they do here. It was a clever tool to use to make you freaked out, to make you think, and to make you seriously creeped out. My leg's really falling asleep. Oh, so painful. Pins and needles are seriously one of the worst things there are. I would recommend this book specifically to people trying to get into horror. My leg is, oh, these pins and needles seriously hurt me. Oh, this is so uncomfortable. One sec. As I said before, was so rudely interrupted by my leg. I would maybe recommend this to first-time horror readers. This felt like a very quiet and closed-off horror book. It's not, there's definitely some gory bits in it. Also, if you are very sensitive to animal death, maybe skip this one. I could deal with it, but I'm not super sensitive to those themes, so just keep that in mind, because it's not over the top and very, it's like secluded and very contained. I think this is a good one to start with if you are thinking about branching out and reading some horror books. Yeah. Up next is 5 Tuesdays in Winter by Lily King. If I'm going to be completely honest, this is one that I forgot about immediately after I finished reading it. I listened to this on audio and I struggle with short stories in general. I'm not the biggest short story reader, but because I liked Writers and Lovers so much, I wanted to pick up a next book even though it was short stories. But again, I find it so hard to get to know these characters like over and over again and never really being able to connect to them and then just letting go. I know that's the point and part of the short story genre, but I just don't think I'm a short story reader. I've not really got much to say about this. I treated this more like a podcast when I was cleaning or when I was just walking to work or doing chores. Sorry, I am aware that in general I'm not the best book reviewer just because my thoughts are very concise or articulate, but especially with this one there's just no thoughts, head empty. Sorry. Next up, this is the only book I physically own right now that I read this month. Beautiful World, Where Are You? I finally got to this. I'm very excited that I did. It was good. I don't think Sally Rooney could ever disappoint me, so just like every other person as well, I love her writing, I love her stories, everything she writes I just eat up. I've got a reading blog where I talk more in detail about what I thought about this book, the premise of this book. I'll link that below, even though I don't think you even need to hear any more about it because it's been talked about to death on the internet. But rightly so, it was a great book. Not my favourite Sally Rooney, Normal People probably still takes that place, but great nonetheless. After that, I read Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, which was probably the book that I thought about the most this month, or that stuck with me the most. It's a story that spans over a woman's life. Her name's Martha. We mostly follow her through her adult years and her 2 marriages. We also get some flashbacks of her earlier years and how she kind of came to be here. The protagonist, Martha, she struggles with quite severe mental health issues all throughout the book, but nothing's ever really diagnosed. She's not really certain what exactly is going on until towards the end of the book she goes to see a new doctor, and he helps her diagnose her with what I believe is meant to be schizophrenia. It's not actually named in the book, so I listened to this on audio and it was just named as X, which I actually really like that choice to not name what she's diagnosed with or her disorder. I'm gonna guess that it is to destigmatize the disorder of schizophrenia, or what I'm guessing to be schizophrenia, and disconnect the images and thoughts that our brain immediately jumps to when we do think of schizophrenia, and to just portray everything that Martha is actually going through and her actual symptoms. Doing it that way makes you connect and empathize a lot more with Martha. Also the fact that for most of the book you're not exactly sure what's going on with her. You haven't got this idea of what her disorder might be. Also the fact that for most of the book you're not exactly sure what is going on with her, it makes you connect and empathize with her so much more, I think, than if they were to tell you in the beginning, this is Martha, she's got schizophrenia, this is her story. The way that Meg Mason decided to first portray what's going on with her, how this affects her relationships, how it affects her whole life, her moods, the journey that she goes through in her life, her job, her decision whether or not to have children, it affects everything. And I really appreciate that this story wasn't just the dramatized version of what schizophrenia often is portrayed as, and what a lot of the time isn't the reality. I did some training to be a counsellor last year, and so much of that training was the topic of schizophrenia, just because it's so incredibly complex and so many things also play into that. Obviously I'm just going off what I think is intended here. I'm not sure if the author meant to portray schizophrenia. That's just what I gathered. Another thing that I actually really appreciated about this book is that none of the characters were really described physically, especially Martha. A lot of the time I think with these, I don't even want to call her that, but these like unhinged, mentally ill women, they're always 20-something, blonde, slim, like mostly living in New York, and I like that this wasn't that story. Also, before I started reading this, I've seen this compared to Fleabag. I'm not sure why or how that comparison was made. I didn't see it. The humour in this wasn't exactly that witty, I didn't think, or maybe it just wasn't my kind of thing. Also, I'm not sure every white British somewhat witty woman needs to be compared to Fleabag, but that was not an issue for me at all. I just didn't see where that comparison came into it. All in all, I thought it was a great book though. I really, really enjoyed it, and as I said, I thought about this a lot. If you are open to read about mental health stories, if that's something that you are in a mindset to do, I would really, really highly recommend this. After that, I read Cleopatra and Frankenstein, which sadly wasn't the success that it seemed to have been for everyone else on the internet. We follow Cleo and Frank, who meet at a New Year's Eve party, and they kind of instantly fall in love. They get married quite quickly, partly because they are in love, partly for a green card visa situation for Cleo because she is from England originally. Cleo is, I believe, like 20 years younger than Frank, and we follow their relationships, the troubles in their relationships, their life in New York. Eventually we see their relationship fall apart. First of all, before I get into this, huge warning for suicide. If that's not something you feel able to read about or want to read about, I would skip this. There's quite a graphic scene in this. Unfortunately, this story fell quite flat for me. I didn't think it was interesting. I was quite bored through a lot of it. That might also be because I've just read maybe one too many stories similar to this. That being said, I think a lot of the side characters were more interesting and had just a lot more substance to them than the two main characters, Cleo and Frank. Especially Eleanor, who we get to meet a little bit later in the book, and Zoe, who is Frank's much younger sister. She struggles financially, but she's too proud to ask Frank for money. He's really wealthy, but she wants to make it on her own. She wants to make her own money, so she ends up signing up for this sugar baby, sugar daddy website, which I would have loved to hear more about. That was, to me, almost the most interesting part of the story, but we only get little slices of that, unfortunately. Most of these characters just felt very flat, one-dimensional, and very stereotypical to me. It felt like a debut novel, which sounds super pretentious to say, but that's just the vibe that I got, sorry. Maybe if you haven't read a lot of young woman in New York or troubled relationship type of stories, maybe you could really like this. I think if I read this maybe 2 years ago, I could have really enjoyed this, but I've just read better books that are similar to this. One last thing, in the blurb, this is compared to Sally Rooney's Conversation with Friends, where I don't see any comparison. I do not understand. She has conversations with friends in this book. Is that the comparison? Because the writing is not similar or on par with Sally Rooney. None of the themes are similar, I don't think. So maybe the age gap, maybe that's what they were talking about. I'm not sure, but if you read it based on that comparison, don't skip it. It's not, you're going to be disappointed. And lastly, my 7th book of the month was My Friend Anna by Rachel Deloche Williams. I believe that's how you pronounce the name, I'm not exactly sure. Just like the rest of the world, I just watched Inventing Anna and actually really enjoyed it. So I was inspired to finally pick up this book. It's been on my TBR for a long time, and this just kind of gave me the last kick up the arse that I needed. This is a non-fiction told by Rachel, who used to be friends with Anna Delvey, quite close friends for a while actually, and due to unfortunate circumstances she is scammed by Anna Delvey out of $60,000. The actual tagline of the book is the true story of a fake heiress, which I feel like they're really trying to hone in on, especially in the Netflix series, but also this book. But I think at the heart of this story really is the falling apart of an actual friendship. Rachel, even when she is owed $60,000, is still so empathetic towards Anna. She's still really trying to help her out of the situation. Obviously her top priority is to get her money back, which she never actually ends up getting back, spoiler alert. But she's also trying to understand Anna, help her out of the situation. She sees that her friend is in trouble, that she put herself in a situation that she can't really get out of. The way that this is written feels almost fictional, which I believe to be intentional, just because that makes it so fast-paced and so fast to read. This is obviously a dramatized version and an edited version of the events that actually happened. But I'm not gonna lie, this was a very entertaining and quick and easy read for me to consume, and I couldn't stop reading because I was so intrigued by what was gonna happen. Entertaining is not the right word, because this is obviously someone's real life story and something that Rachel had to go through, and which was obviously very traumatizing for her. I do think that this was marketed very well, and yeah, I ate it up. I think a lot of other people also did. I really enjoyed it. Those were the books that I read. I actually really enjoyed my reading month, so yay, love that for me. As always, thank you very, very much for watching. If you'd like to, you can subscribe or give me a thumbs up. Both of those things really help me out. If you do, thank you very much. If you don't, no worries. That is everything. Goodbye. I'll see you in my next video.